Hey guys, tonight we journey back, way back, to a time when bread was sacred. The Nile was the heartbeat of an empire, and every bite you took might come with a complimentary crunch of sand. You're in ancient Egypt, where the sun blazes down, the river hums with life, and the warm scent of fresh dough battles the dry, dusty wind for control of your nostrils. Imagine standing in the soft golden light of early morning in Thebes. The city hasn't quite woken up yet. You can hear the distant bleating of goats, the soft lap of river water against boats made of papyrus, and the rhythmic scraping of grinding stones echoing out from the communal bakery. You're not a noble or priest. No divine incense or silk robes here. Nope, you're a baker. And while you may not command armies or bless the harvest, you do command something arguably more important: the bread. But here's the kicker. Your worst enemy isn't famine or rodents. It's sand. That ever-present, wine-carried invader that gets into everything. Your clothes, your hair, your flour. You know the rules. One grain of sand too many in the daily rations, and you'll be the target of some very pointed complaints. Or worse, bruised egos among priests who consider themselves gourmet gods. And yet, there it is again. Another gust of desert air, swirling, past your modest open-air kitchen, dusting your precious flour with another invisible layer of grit. You sigh. You'll never win. But you try anyway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're listening from anywhere particularly sandy yourself, let me know in the comments. Drop your location and your local time. I always love seeing where we all gather from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drag your tired feet across the uneven courtyard toward the grindstone. Already the early warmth of the sun tingles across your skin like a gentle warning. Heat is coming. You brush aside a thin veil of linen shielding your grain and squat by the saddle quern. The stone is cool under your palms for now. You reach into the storage jar and scoop out a handful of emmer wheat. The kernels are hard and husky, defiant little things, like miniature shields forged by the gods to mock your mortal hands. It's not easy grain, but it's the grain of the people, the grain of the dead, the grain of eternity. You pour it into the quern's hollow and begin the day's first grind. Scrape. Grind. Push. Pull. Sand grits under your knees. You try not to think about how much of it's already in the flour. You know how this goes. Your grinding stone is made of basalt, a porous rock that flakes ever so slightly with use. Every grind releases microscopic bits. You're basically seasoning the flour with stone. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians realized they were chewing on stone dust sandwiches. Some claim it was just the cost of living in the desert. Others believe it was intentional, that gritty bread helped clean teeth. Spoiler, it didn't. It just destroyed them. Archaeologists routinely find skulls with teeth worn down to nubs, jaws riddled with abscesses. Bread was life, but it was a tough life. Still, the rhythm is soothing. You've done this so long that your arms move on their own. You think about nothing, everything, and occasionally the cat that wanders by, hoping for a dropped scrap. You toss him a hardened crust from yesterday. He sniffs, flicks his tail, and struts off like he was doing you the favor. Classic. As the sky grows brighter, more workers arrive. There's Asha, who swears by double sifting her flour, and Many, who somehow manages to get dates in his loaves when the rest of you barely get salt. He's clearly got a side hustle with the kitchen priests. You greet each other with sleepy nods and wordless gestures, too used to the routine to need conversation. Someone starts up the fire pit, coaxing a spark into a warm, crackling glow beneath the clay ovens. The smell of smoke joins the air, mingling with flour dust and morning sweat. And behind it all, the dry, raspy whisper of the desert wind, your eternal companion. Bread in this world isn't just food. It's payment. It's worship. It's medicine, rations, and ritual. Every day, loaves must be made not just for the people, but for the gods, the dead, and the state. You remember once being tasked to bake 1,000 bear-shaped loaves for an upcoming festival. Bear-shaped. You live in a place where the wildest animal is a cow with an attitude. You think of the workers building the pharaoh's latest monument upriver. They eat your bread. You imagine them lifting massive blocks, muscles straining, teeth crunching through loaves that are half nourishment, half geology. There's a joke whispered among your crew, something about how even the gods must floss after a bite. You're not sure they'd laugh, but you do. Nearby, a pot clangs. Water's heating. Someone's prepping the yeast, Asha's singing under her breath. Something about a crocodile that stole her dough. Probably metaphorical. Hopefully. And still, you grind. The sun is rising now, light catching on the tiny swirling particles of dust and flour that dance in the air around you. You pause to wipe your brow. A sheen of sweat forms. You squint toward the Nile, just visible between two mud-brick buildings. Boats are already bustling. The day has begun. You'll be here for hours, grinding, kneading, shaping. But you take comfort in the knowledge that this work stretches across centuries, that some version of you, a baker, tired and gritty, stood here 500 years ago, and 500 years from now, someone else will curse the same wind, the same sand, and the same stone-speckled flour. Because in Egypt, nothing changes quickly. Except maybe the wind. You roll your shoulders, aching from the morning grind, and glance up at the first sliver of sun breaking over the eastern horizon. The stars are retreating, but just barely, clinging to the purple sky like sleepy sentries not quite ready to leave their post. It's still early, too early, but you're already behind. The baker's day begins before dawn, because heat is a brutal tyrant. By midday, the air inside the bakery could cook bread on its own, no fire needed. So here you are, in the half-light, moving quickly and silently through familiar tasks like a sleepwalker who's memorized every corner of the kitchen. You reach for the grindstone again, but someone beats you to it. Young Hori, the apprentice, all elbows and enthusiasm. He grins, eager to prove himself. You let him take over, only half because your back is begging for mercy. You shuffle over to the water jars, clay pots, cool and sweating in the morning air, holding Nile water that's been settling overnight. You ladle some into a basin and splash your face. The cold bites in the best way. For a moment, you feel awake. For a moment. Next to you, a wide wooden trough awaits, already dusted with flour and anticipation. You tip the first batch in. You add a pinch of salt, rare and carefully rationed, and a dollop of yesterday's leftover dough, bubbling with wild yeast. It's pungent, slightly sour, alive. You stir it in, feeling the texture with your fingers. Kneading isn't a task, it's a therapy session. The dough resists at first, stubborn like every apprentice you've ever had. But slowly, under your hands, it yields, folds, breathes. The surface becomes smoother, stretchier, warmer. It's like massaging a sleepy animal into wakefulness. The quiet is occasionally broken by the thump-thump of dough slamming into the trough. You keep a rhythm. It helps. Someone starts humming a low tune, and you join in without thinking. It's a song your grandmother used to sing while baking. Something about how bread made with silence will turn to stone. Something about gossip curdling, the yeast. The fragrance begins to rise. Not yet baked, but warm, earthy, tangy. It wraps around you like a promise. Bread is coming. But here's the thing. This bread isn't for you. Your batch today? It's temple bread. You'll bake dozens of loaves that will end up in the hands of priests, laid before painted gods in cool stone sanctuaries, left to dry out in the incense-choked stillness of shrines. These loaves are offerings. They won't be eaten, not in the usual sense. They'll sit, absorb holiness, then maybe, be redistributed as sacred leftovers. You try not to think too hard about that. It's better to focus on the dough. Keep folding. Keep kneading. Behind you, someone sneezes. probably from the flour in the air. Dust motes swirl in a golden haze, caught in a shaft of sunlight now cutting through the wall's cracks. The clay. Walls are still cool, but you know they won't be for long. You glance over to the large flat trays where shaped dough will rest before baking. Some are round, some oblong, some shaped like animals, tiny fish, birds, or the occasional turtle. Not for fun. These shapes have meaning, symbolism, ritual. The gods, apparently, like their bread festive. Historians still argue over whether these animal-shaped loaves were symbolic meals or if some priest once just really wanted a turtle sandwich. No one knows, but the shapes remain. Now comes the brush-off. Literally. You take a small bundle of bundled reeds, your primitive broom, and gently brush each tray to clear off any fallen sand or ash. It's a losing battle. You're brushing floury dough on open-air counters in a city made of dust. But tradition demands the attempt. You remember the day you were taught this. Even if the gods don't eat, they don't like their offerings. Dirty. Wise words from an old baker with fewer teeth than loaves in the oven. You think he might have had a point. Then comes the inspection. From behind the curtain that separates the work area from the temple proper, a priest glides in. He's draped in clean linen, eyes already narrowed. He sniffs, peers, picks up a loaf and turns it over like he's evaluating a gemstone. You suppress the urge to roll your eyes. This guy never baked a day in his life, but he has opinions, always does, and somehow, despite all your efforts, he finds one loaf slightly misshapen. It looks like a fish that drowned in sorrow, he mutters. You nod solemnly. You'll remake it. You will not, however, scream into the flour sack like last time. You've matured, slightly. Still, you can't help but notice that when the priest turns to leave, he nabs a small honey loaf on the way out. One of the sweet ones you made by accident. Back to work. You divide the rested dough and begin forming more loaves. Your fingers move swiftly, shaping with practiced care. Each loaf is a small sculpture, a fleeting piece of art doomed to either be devoured or mummified on an altar. The oven crew signals you. Fires are ready. The clay domes glow from within, heat shimmering just above the mouths. The smell of charcoal is stronger now, smoky, earthy, with a hint of something vaguely alarming. Someone probably burned their first loaf of the day. It happens. You deliver the trays, placing them carefully near the oven's entrance to rise. A little more in the warmth. Timing is everything here. 1 minute too long and the dough collapses. 1 minute too early and it bakes dense as a brick. You stretch your back again, eyeing the rising sun. It's going to be a long day. But already, the scent of baking bread begins to mingle with the air. Warm, sweet, comforting. You smile. Despite the sand, the sweat, the priests, and the impossible standards of divine pastry critique, this is still the best part of the day. You take a breath. Dust clings to your lips. Flour tickles your nose. You wipe your hands on your tunic and head back to start the next batch, because bread, like the Nile, never stops. The sun is climbing now, turning the edges of the mud brick buildings a soft amber. You squint toward the horizon and feel it. That familiar shimmer in the air, the way heat starts to rise like invisible waves off the ground. The window for baking is closing. Fast. You hurry over to the ovens. The first batch is already in. The clay domes, called taberns, are blazing hot, their rounded bellies glowing with fire-brick energy. You kneel, peering into the mouth of one oven. Inside, small loaves cling to the curved inner wall, stuck there like sleepy barnacles. It's a strange method. No racks, no trays, just dough pressed directly onto superheated clay. But it works. And the smell, oh, the smell. It hits you like a memory you never had. Warm, earthy, with notes of yeast and smoke, and the faintest trace of sweetness, if you're lucky enough to have honey in the mix. You inhale deeply and almost forget the sand in your sandals. Today's batch isn't just temple bread. It's also for the house of life. a training center where scribes learn to write and occasionally nibble. You know the place. You once delivered bread there and caught a scholar reading aloud to a cat. The cat seemed unimpressed, but that's cats for you. You slide a flat paddle into the oven and retrieve the first loaf. It's crisp on the outside, slightly puffed in the middle. You tap the crust. Hollow. Perfect. You feel a rare, quiet pride. And then, crack. A loaf splits in your hand. You frown, inspecting the edge. There's a streak of black ash in the middle, and worse, a sliver of stone you must have missed during grinding. You sigh. Another casualty in the war on sand. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians truly considered this an issue. Some point to extra filtering techniques, like double sifting through fine linen, as evidence they cared. Others argue that by the time the loaves made it to the average labourer's mouth, no one gave a fig. Those teeth were already doomed. You deposit the ruined loaf in the offering pile. It'll go to the animals, or to someone who really annoyed a supervisor. Your assistant, Hori, returns with the shaped dough for the next batch. His hair is full of flour. He looks proud. You don't have the heart to tell him one of his loaves. Looks more like a collapsed frog than the intended fish. It's fine. The gods are said to appreciate interpretation. Together, you begin prepping the next sacred set. This one intended for Ra himself. Yes, that Ra. The sun god, the flaming disk in the sky who rides across the heavens in a golden boat while fighting off serpents of darkness. No pressure. You take your time with this batch. The priests said to include dates, a drizzle of honey, and, if possible, a little oil. Luxuries. It's a miracle you even have dates today. You crush them carefully, pressing them into a paste with a little warm water, folding them into the dough until it becomes something richer, softer, more indulgent. You shape the loaves into sun discs, round, flat, scored in rays. Hori suggests a tiny face in the middle, just for fun. You raise an eyebrow. He sketches a smiling Ra with his finger in the flour. Too cheeky, he asks. You laugh. Keep it. Maybe he'll take it as a compliment. With reverence, you slide the sun disk loaves into the oven. They hiss slightly as they meet the hot surface, puffing gently at the edges. The heat here is intense. You have to lean back every few seconds just to breathe. Sweat beads on your neck, and ash clings to your arms. You remember the stories your uncle told, how sometimes, in festivals, the ovens would be stoked so hot that sparks danced like fireflies, and loaves would cook in seconds. Don't blink, he'd say, or the bread will vanish. Probably exaggerated, but not by much. Behind you, Asher sings again, this time a hymn. It's soft, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Something about the goddess Isis feeding Osiris bread from the land of the blessed. You sway a little as you listen, letting the melody carry. You away while keeping an eye on the oven. A stray cat brushes against your leg, probably the same one from earlier. He's smarter than most. Knows bread time means snack time. You toss him a scrap, and he vanishes into the shadows. And then, a procession begins to form outside. 2 junior priests draped in pale linen approach the bakery's side entrance with that slow, overly dignified walk they always use. Behind them, a young temple servant carries a tray of fresh lotus blossoms, and another holds a bronze incense burner, smoke trailing behind like a divine tail. It's time to present the bread. You carefully remove the sun disk, loaves now golden and steaming, and arrange them on a ceremonial tray. Hori helps, eyes wide. He's never done this part before. The priest nods once, approves the arrangement with a slight sniff, and takes the tray. You watch as they walk off toward the sanctuary, bread balanced like a treasure. And in a way, it is. Bread is power here, not just food. It feeds gods, builds pyramids, heals the sick, pays workers, and celebrates birth and death. Bread, in ancient Egypt, is the currency of the cosmos. You return to the hearth and pull out another batch. This one's for the kitchen across town. The baker's equivalent of dine and dash loaves. Quick, dirty, and practical. Less ceremony, more crumbs. Still, you shape each one with care. Not just for pride, but because you know someone out there will eat this. A labourer, a scribe, maybe a child. Someone will taste this loaf and, even through the grit, feel a little more alive. The morning wears on. The ovens continue to burn. The dough continues to rise. And you continue to bake. Because someone has to feed the gods. Someone has to feed the people. And in this sun-baked city of dust and gold, that someone is you. Your fingers are starting to feel it. Tiny cuts along the tips, cracks forming in the creases of your knuckles. Not from the heat, or even the kneading. No, the culprit is the grain itself, emmer wheat. This stubborn little grain is the cornerstone of your daily struggle. You stare at it now, spread across a woven mat, basking in the filtered sunlight like it's smug about all the trouble it causes. And maybe it should be smug. After all, it's fed empires. It's older than pyramids. But that doesn't make it any less infuriating. Unlike modern wheat, emmer comes with armour. 2 husks cling tightly to each kernel, like clingy siblings who refuse to leave home. You can't grind it raw. You have to thresh and winnow first, then maybe toast it to loosen things up. That's already half a day gone before you've even started making dough. You crouch beside the basket and pick up a handful. The kernels are tan, a little shiny, tough as pebbles. You rub them between your palms, watching the chaff separate. A small cloud of dust puffs into your face. You sneeze. Twice. Hori chuckles. You'd think after all this time, you mutter. They'd grow something easier, like magic bread trees, Hori offers. You snort. Yes, let's ask Ra to plant some. Historians still debate whether ancient Egyptian bakers had ways to pre-soak or ferment grains before milling to reduce the grit. Some suggest wooden rollers were used to crack emmer more gently than the brutal saddle querns. But there's no consensus, just a lot of guesswork, and a lot of worn-out jawbones in the archaeological record. You remember visiting a tomb once with a retired scribe. Inside were offerings, dried bread, bits of grain, a carved figurine of a woman grinding, and a quern. Proof, the scribe had said, that the afterlife also includes terrible bread. You didn't disagree. Back at your workstation, you sort through the grain. Asher brings over a bundle of sifted flour wrapped in linen. You peer inside. It looks almost clean, almost, but under the surface you know what's lurking. Fine, nearly invisible grains of sand, the kind that slip through every sieve, cling to the linen, hide in the flour's fluff like spies. This is the real battle, not the baking, not the priests. It's the never-ending war against grit. You sigh and begin the sorting process. Again. You reach for the sifting frame, a square of wood stretched with fine linen. You pour the flour through, tapping it gently with your fingers. A puff of powder rises like breath. On the linen's surface, tiny dark specks remain. Some are husk. Some are stone. Some sand. You flick them away. Do you think they'll notice? Hori asks. You raise an eyebrow. They always notice. He's not wrong to wonder, though. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes a loaf passes unnoticed, the sand hiding in the crust. But when it doesn't, oh, they let you know. There was once a nobleman, fat, sweaty, always reeking of fish oil, who sent a servant back with a half-eaten loaf and a chipped tooth. You remember that day because you almost quit baking and became a boatman instead. Sand is everywhere in that job too, but at least no one blames you when the Nile is gritty. You scrape the last of the sifted flour into a jar, then tuck the linen aside for washing. You'll beat it over the washing stones later, by the river. Try to get the sand out of the sieve for once, instead of just out of the bread. You kneel by the fire pit, tossing in a few more twigs. The flame flickers, low and lazy, but enough to warm the air and coax the loaves into rising. You check one, soft and swelling, faint cracks forming at the edges like stretch marks on a new mother's belly. You smile. There's something honest about that, something raw. You glance at your basket of emmer again. You remember the harvest season, weeks ago, when you and your neighbours gathered in the fields, scythes swinging through tall golden stalks. The grain came in heavy, fragrant, full of promise. And sand, always the sand. The Nile blesses and curses. It gives life through flood, then dries to dust. Its waters rise and retreat, leaving behind a perfect cradle for crops, but never without grit. Every time the river floods, it deposits not just nutrients, but new layers of fine flower-killing sediment. Your father used to say, "The Nile is generous, but she makes you chew for your blessings." He wasn't wrong. You sit down for a brief moment, letting the warmth of the oven soothe your sore legs. Asha hands you a half loaf from yesterday, crusty but still edible. You break it, chew, and yep, there it is. Crunch. Right in the molars. You don't spit it out. What's the point? The sky's turning white now, heat beginning to shimmer in the distance. Flies buzz lazily. You swat one away from the dough. They're particularly aggressive today, drawn to the warmth, the yeast, the sugar. You pull a cloth over the rising loaves and retreat for a brief splash of water. In the basin, you catch your reflection. Dust-smudged cheeks, flour in your brows, sweat beading on your upper lip. You look like a ghost made of ash and sun. And yet, this is life. This is sustenance. This is the craft that outlives kings. Emmer wheat may be stubborn. It may chew like gravel. It may wear down your hands and teeth and spirit. But it feeds your people, your gods, your world. And so with sand under your nails and flour in your hair, you rise again. More dough to knead, more grit to battle, more bread to shape for gods who probably don't eat, and people who definitely do. You're back at the quern, your knees sunk deep into a folded mat made of straw that used to cushion better years ago. The sun is now fully up, glaring over the rooftops like a suspicious foreman, and your shadow shrinks beneath you. The quern stone is warm to the touch now. Not searing yet, but it will be. Everything will be. You grip the grinding stone, a smooth, heavy chunk of basalt, and begin to push it forward and back over the emmer wheat. You already know what's coming. The satisfying crunch of grain breaking into flour, the fine powder billowing up into your nose, and the sound, that rasping scrape that sinks into your bones over time until even your dreams echo with it. Stone on stone, over and over. Historians have tried to reconstruct this process, and some even tested wear on bones to confirm it. Ancient bakers often developed shoulder and knee damage from years spent in this posture, grinding endlessly. It's not elegant, it's not graceful, but it's the only way. The saddle quern is the tool of the age, and your tormentor. There's something else too. You can feel it every time the grinding stone rolls over the grain, the grit, the tiny fragments of basalt breaking loose from the bottom, mixing invisibly into the flour. Not sand this time. Stone, actual ground-up rock, powdered by your own labour. And you know, as always, some of it will end up in the dough, in the bread, in someone's teeth. You pause to stretch your fingers. They crack like dry twigs. You flex them, then return to the grind. Why not use a mill like the Greeks? Hori mumbles behind you, chewing on a date. They say they have stones that turn. You don't look up. And when you find a river that turns stones without stopping, I'll build one myself. He nods. But you both know the truth. Those rotary mills don't exist here yet. Not widely. Not for you. The elite might experiment with them, but here in the baking trenches of everyday Egypt, it's you and your quern. Grinding. Forever. You reach for a fresh bowl of emmer and dump it into the quern's groove. It cascades down in a soft clatter, like dry rain. You resume the rhythm. Push, pull, push, pull. Sweat beads on your brow. You wipe it with your sleeve, leaving a streak of flour across your face like war paint. Suddenly, a shout from the next room, Asha, sounding panicked. You rise, groaning from stiff knees, and step around the quern. "Look at this," she says, holding out a loaf. At first glance, it looks fine. Round, gently browned, even a little puffed. Then you spot the problem. Embedded in the crust is a small, sharp flake of stone, black, angular, basalt. Your stomach drops. "How?" She points at the quern. "That new one. The edge is crumbling." Of course, new stones sometimes do that, until they're worn down just enough. You thought it was ready. You were wrong. You sigh, heavy and long. That's half a morning's flour, possibly ruined. You'll have to re-sift it all, maybe even toss it, if the flakes are too fine to catch. You glance at Hori. He's already backing away like he wants to evaporate. You don't yell. What's the point? Instead, you kneel beside the quern and inspect the stone's surface. Sure enough, there's a sharp ridge crumbling near the front. You brush it gently, and more flakes loosen. You'll have to sand it down, with more stone. The irony is not lost on you. You begin rubbing a smaller piece of pumice against the quern's edge, slowly dulling the bite. This will take time, but there's no alternative. You can't bake knives into the god's bread. While you work, your mind drifts, like it always does in the lull between tasks. You remember hearing that in some temples. Bakers chant while grinding, invoking protection from Taweret, the hippo goddess who guards childbirth and kitchens. Others whisper prayers to Bez, that strange dwarf-like god with lion features, who keeps away evil spirits and rodents. You don't pray much, but you do mumble sometimes. Little things, curses, jokes, quiet offerings to the grinding gods, whoever they are. "May your stones stay whole," you mutter now, "and may the priests chip their own teeth." Asha snorts behind you. You finish smoothing the edge and dust off your hands. They're blackened with stone dust and flour, an unnatural mix that clings to your skin like guilt. You return to the flour basin, running your fingers through the last sifted batch. It feels soft, mostly clean. You pinch it, rub it, sift again. Still, there's that grainy feel. Not enough to see, but enough to feel, like walking on sandpaper. "Do you think they can taste it?" Hori asks. You pause. You've eaten enough of your own bread to know the truth. Sometimes no. The bread masks it until it doesn't. Then comes the crunch, the telltale snap of something not quite organic. "I think," you say slowly, "they notice when it's gone, but not when it's there." That's the real danger. You can get used to it. You do get used to it. That's the worst part. One day you wake up and crunching on quartz seems normal. Still, you do what you can. You sift again. You sort again. You grind, this time more gently. You recheck every edge, every bowl. Because even if the gods never say thank you, and even if the nobles spit crumbs with disdain, you know what goes into every loaf. Stone, sweat, and stubborn care. You stand, stretch your back again, and carry the flour to the dough trough. Time to mix, time to knead. Again, because the stones don't rest. And neither do you. Your shoulders ache, your elbows throb, and your thighs burn from too much squatting. You've lost count of how many times you've sifted, how many bowls of flour you've passed through linen, how many curses you've mumbled under your breath. And still, the battle continues. You versus the sand. You're at the sifting frame again, your old companion in futility. A rectangle of wood with a fine linen mesh stretched tight across the center. Not so tight that it strains, but taut enough to trap anything bigger than a grain of flour. That's the idea anyway. You pour a fresh scoop of ground flour onto the cloth and begin the same gentle motion as always. Tap, tap, circle, tap. The fine dust falls through like sifted silk, while the heavier bits, husk fragments, the occasional pebble, and far too often, gritty little offenders, sit stubbornly, on top. You blow on them lightly. A few grains fly off, a few stay. You flick them with your finger, a soft thip that's oddly satisfying. It's like playing a game you never win but can't stop playing. Today, Hori is trying something new. He's rigged 2 frames, one above the other, and is attempting a double sift. He claims it'll revolutionize the flour quality. You humor him. After all, youthful optimism is the last thing you want to crush too early in the day. You know, he says, proudly watching flour cascade between the frames like a sandy waterfall. If we do this every time, maybe we can make noble bread. You smirk. Noble bread doesn't come from less sand. It comes from more honey. He frowns. But the priest said, the priests say a lot of things. You interrupt, catching a glint of grit in the sunlight. Like how Ra rides a flaming boat across the sky doesn't mean we can bake on it. Still, you admire his effort. It's clean, crisp. He's even figured out how to angle the second cloth to let the flour slide down into a collection basin. The boy might be onto something. Historians still puzzle over how advanced some ancient sifting techniques were. Some speculate that finer cloth, imported from wealthy linen weavers, was used exclusively in temples. Others believe that in homes people simply didn't bother. You live somewhere in between. Too proud to ignore the grit, too poor to afford silk screens. You finish the last pass, gently fold the linen corners, and shake out the waste, the clumpy little ghosts of what almost made it into someone's loaf. Meanwhile, outside, the day has grown louder. The market's begun to stir. You can hear the bray of a donkey, the call of a fish seller, the unmistakable rhythm of a man hawking onions like their treasure. A soft breeze blows, and with it, of course, sand. It finds you. Always. You pull a cloth over the finished flour and retreat inside, away from the worst of the wind. In your tiny alcove of shadow and sweat, the fire still glows in the pit. Asha is already shaping dough beside it, her hands moving with quiet precision. You join her. Today it's round loaves, simple, dense, meant for a funeral offering. The local potter died. Nice man. Used to bring you old cracked jars to grind, spices in. Now his family needs 50 loaves to honor him at the ritual. You start shaping, your fingers pressing the dough into tight, weighty orbs. The texture is good, elastic. You suspect the double-sifted flour actually did help. Hori beams from the corner without saying anything, but the smug look says plenty. As you work, your hands coated in sticky residue, you fall into rhythm again. Press, roll, shape, tap, over and over. A cat curls up by the warm hearth. The fire snaps occasionally, wood hissing as it splits and sighs. You hear someone outside spill a jug of water and curse. A goose honks angrily in response. It's a noisy day. But here inside, the rhythm of baking holds. You reach for another dough ball and notice something. An odd indentation. You poke it gently. A bubble? No. A small stone. Perfectly round. Not flour, not husk, just a stone. You pull it out, flick it away, and shake your head. Even after all the sifting, all the sieving, all the careful cloth handling, it got in. Of course it did. You could swear the sand has a mind of its own, as if the gods cursed bakers personally, laughing as each invisible particle danced its way into the sacred dough. Some say it's a test. Others say it's just the dessert, being the desert. You say nothing. You just keep shaping. The funeral loaves are done. You arrange them on a broad clay tray, cover them with a damp cloth, and set them beside the fire to rise. Later, they'll bake low and slow, dense, almost cake-like, heavy enough to last through morning. You glance around the bakery. Your hands ache. Your back throbs. You've been up since stars still blinked in the sky. You're covered in flour and grit and disappointment. But the bread is good. You walk outside briefly. The sun stabs your eyes. You blink into it. Down the lane, a woman is carrying a tray of fresh onions. Children chase each other around her, giggling. Dust curls around their feet. You sigh, turn back inside, and pull the cloth off a basket of rising dough. Time for another batch. Because sifting might not be perfect. It never will be. But every pass through the linen, every tap of the frame, every flick of a stone, it all adds up. It's the slow victory of care. Even when the sand wins. The heat has settled in for the day. Thick, insistent, wrapping around your skin like a wet wool blanket. Inside the bakery, the fire's breath lingers in every corner. The smell of baked loaves, charcoal smoke, and singed flour is now a part of your lungs, as familiar as your own heartbeat. You move slower now. Everyone does. Not from laziness, but from wisdom. You have to pace yourself, or the day will eat you alive before lunch. You crouch by one of the clay ovens, checking the last of the funeral loaves. The crust has darkened, to the colour of old parchment. Steam hisses softly from a cracked edge. You nudge it with your paddle, firm, not too dry. You exhale, satisfied. Across the room, Asha fans smoke away from her eyes with one hand and flips flat loaves onto a cooling mat. These aren't the fancy sunbreads or temple discs. These are the daily kind, the ones for workers, market stalls, quick bites between long jobs. You've always liked the smell of these best. They're humble, but honest. And now comes the part no one loves, cleaning out the oven. You grit your teeth and grab the long, soot-black scraper, essentially a bent iron rod with a flattened edge, and begin pulling ashes out from the oven's mouth. They cascade in little avalanches, glowing softly at their cores. Hot coals spit sparks that land on your sandals. You ignore them. You're used to it. Someone once said, bakers don't get burned, they get seasoned. You believe it. When the oven's clear, you sweep the floor around it. Ash and flour mix into grey smears. Everything in this room is either hot or dusty, or both. And yet you find yourself smiling a little, because now comes your favourite part. You walk over to the open-air bench where the sweet batch waits. These loaves are special. Meant for the kitchen of a minor official who, either out of guilt, bribery or taste, has sent over jars of honey, crushed figs, and even a pinch of cinnamon. You only get to bake like this once a week, maybe less. You breathe it in. The sticky sweetness of the honey, the rich scent of dried figs mashed into paste. Asha is already folding the mixture into the dough, and you help shape it into braided rounds. The dough glistens where the honey leaks through, catching the light like tiny golden scars. This isn't just bread. This is indulgence. This is how rich people eat, how gods probably eat, if they even bother chewing. You place the loaves onto a flat slab of clay, then lower them into the gentler oven, the one you stoked earlier just for these. No flames now, just deep heat, the kind that soaks in slow and steady. You lean back, close your eyes for a second, and just listen. The faint pop of baking air bubbles, the rustle of linen over rising dough, a soft cooing from the pigeon that's made its nest in the ceiling, beam above the flour jars. Even the ever-present hum of the city seems to take a break. For a moment, the bakery breathes. Then the silence is broken by commotion from outside. You step to the doorway. Down the street, a long line is forming. Men, women, even children, gathered outside the temple in festival robes. Of course, you forgot. Today's the first day of the Opet festival, a month of celebration, parades, rituals, music, offerings, and of course, bread. So much bread. You turn to Asha, who already looks horrified. Don't say it, she warns. You say it anyway. We're going to need to triple production. The Opet festival is no small affair. Dedicated to Amun, Mut, and their son, Khonsu, it's a divine family reunion that brings Thebes to a full-throated roar. People travel from villages miles away to see the processions. Priests carry gold-covered statues through the streets. Musicians bang on sistrums and drums. Dancers whirl in dust clouds. And in the middle of it all, the bread. It feeds the priests, the crowds, the workers who prep the statues, the boatmen who row sacred barges down the Nile. It's part of the offerings. It's handed out to the poor. It's thrown to the air in blessing. And guess who gets to make it? You glance at your flour supply, barely enough for today, let alone a festival. You sigh. You pull the honey loaves from the oven, their crusts now shiny and golden, the scent absolutely sinful. You set them aside gently, admiring the way the sugar has pooled in the crevices. Hori sneaks a look. Touch it and lose a finger, you mutter. He raises both hands and backs away, grinning. Now it's time to plan the festival batch. That means mass dough. No sweetener. No fancy shapes. Just round after round of simple, sturdy loaves meant to last under the sun and survive handling by over-eager temple aides. You and Asher work quickly, scaling ingredients, assigning Hori to start grinding double speed. You glance outside again. More people are arriving. You know what that means. More orders. You'll be baking straight through tonight. Probably tomorrow too. Your only break will be when your hands cramp too hard to hold the paddle. And yet, you don't hate it. There's something about the festival rhythm, the way the whole city pulses in time with drums and chants. The way bread passes from hand to hand, from offering to altar, from family to stranger. Bread is the bond, the unspoken connector between life and gods. Historians still argue whether the loaves made during festivals were considered sacred even after distribution. Some say yes, each crumb a blessing. Others believe only the ones touched by priests held divine value. You think it doesn't matter. Bread made with care feels sacred, no matter who eats it. You begin mixing the first massive batch. The trough groans under the weight. Your arms burn. Your back protests. But the dough is perfect, and the fire is waiting. The sun is now blazing, like Ra himself has decided to personally roast your forehead. The bakery has become an oven within an oven. You can feel the heat radiating from every surface, stone, clay, even your own skin. Sweat clings to you like a second tunic. Everything smells like flour, smoke, and the faint tang of exhaustion. You've cleared the shelves to make room. Festival season waits for no one, and the orders are already piling up. The head priest came by an hour ago and dropped a scroll, with a list so long, it may as well have been a prophecy. 300 festival loaves. By dusk. You consider laying down in the ashes and hoping for divine reincarnation as a fish. But instead, you slap your palms against your apron, square your shoulders, and start. You organize the crew. Hori is on double grinding duty. His arms already look like noodles, but he's still smiling. Asher has taken over shaping and scoring the first batches, while you manage the oven rotation, and so it begins. The dough moves in waves. You knead one batch while 2 rest, while 3 bake, while 4 cool. You develop a rhythm: scoop, mix, fold, knead, cover, rise, bake, cool, repeat. The world shrinks to a series of motions, a tight loop of repetition that numbs the body and quiets the mind. The clay ovens glow like sunstones. You've stoked them to their limit. The heat's so intense that even standing near makes your eyelashes feel crisp. You use a long wooden peel to slide loaves in and out, rotating them just so, judging by smell and instinct alone. There's no timer, only your nose, your eyes, your skin. Each time you pull out a golden brown round, your heart lifts just slightly, until the next wave of dough smacks reality back into you. A courier shows up mid-morning, temple scribe, fancy robe, nose in the air, and a list of last-minute additions. 24 duck-shaped loaves, he says without looking at you. Of course, you reply deadpan, because ducks are essential. Symbolic, he replies, sniffing. Amun rides a duck in some versions. You don't argue, you just sigh. You shape ducks. You're halfway through the duck batch when Hori drops the flour bowl. It explodes across the room like a mini sandstorm. Everyone freezes. You watch it settle slowly over the trays, your shoulders tensing as you imagine which loaves were hit. Silence, Then, "It's festive," Asher says dryly. "Extra dusting." You snort. You want to scream. Instead, you toss Hori a broom. He sweeps in frantic circles while apologizing to Ra. You, and possibly the floor. You refocus. The work doesn't stop. Festival bread is different, not just in quantity, but in its meaning. It's meant to travel, to be touched by dozens of hands, to sit on altars in the sun and still look proud. So the crust has to be strong, the loaf dense, but not hard, the color rich and glowing. You add just a pinch more oil to the festival dough, your own trick. It gives it a softer bite, even after sitting half a day in temple courtyards. Historians still argue whether these tweaks were common practice or personal flair. Some preserved records suggest standard recipes, but others hint at each baker adding their signature touch. You like to think every loaf had a little personality, even if most never got noticed. By midday, the bakery is a war zone. Bowls stacked, high. Dough rising under every cloth you can find. Loaves cooling in every corner. Ashes coating your ankles. Flour on your earlobes. You swear there's some in your eyelashes. And still, they keep coming. A young boy from the weaving district arrives with a small cart. His family has pulled together for a batch of bread to place at the statue of Mut. He has 3 copper rings and a promise that his mother will trade fresh linen for the rest. You agree without haggling, because festival bread isn't just for gods and priests. It's for everyone. Rich or poor, noble or farmer, everyone gives and everyone receives. Bread becomes currency, sacrifice, blessing. You shape his batch with extra care. Round loaves, a small indent on top where his mother will place dried lotus petals. You imagine them in the temple, slightly off-center on the offering table. The priests too distracted to notice, but the family will notice. And that matters more. Later, another courier comes for an entirely different reason. The Queen's steward needs bread for the royal barges, he says. Of course, the royals are visiting the riverfront ceremonies. The steward's order is specific. Round loaves, scored with lotus petals, a honey-sweetened crust, and a hint of safflower oil. You curse quietly, but accept. The steward pays well. Besides, royal loaves are a chance to flex. You pull out your special mold, an old wooden press carved with delicate floral patterns, and gently press it into each loaf. The pattern holds. You brush each one with a thin coat of oil and a drizzle of honey. When baked, they'll glisten like polished amulets. You watch them bake carefully, adjusting the fire and flipping them halfway through. They emerge glowing, warm, and perfect. You don't smile, but you do feel it. A moment of pride, a whisper of triumph. Outside, the sounds of the festival are growing. Drums echo down the alleys. Flute music dances on the wind. You hear children, laughing, vendors shouting, bells jingling on a dancer's ankle. The city is alive. And you're feeding it. You check the tallies. Nearly 200 loaves down. Your arms tremble. Your hands are numb. Your hair sticks to your face. But you're not done. Because when you bake for the gods, the people, and the pulse of a festival, you don't stop until the last crumb is shaped and sealed in fire. You reach for more dough and keep going. The sun has begun its slow descent toward the horizon, but there's no relief in its angle, just a more dramatic shadow cast by your hunched shoulders. Your tunic is stiff with flour, the back soaked in sweat. You've stopped noticing the heat. You've stopped noticing your hands. They work without your permission now. Shape, roll, score, bake, cool. Again, you've passed the 200 loaf mark. It doesn't feel triumphant. It feels dusty. Your forearms throb. Your feet buzz with pins and needles. Asher is sitting for the first time in hours, nursing a blister, chewing on yesterday's crust like it's a delicacy. Hori is kneeling beside a sack of grain, practically sleeping upright, muttering to it as if it's a pillow. Still the fire burns. Still, there are orders. This next batch is different. Not for priests, not for nobles. These are for the workers, brick haulers, rope pullers, and stone chiselers down by the river. You know the ones, the kind who load barges, build temples, and somehow still dance at festivals after 12-hour shifts. You scoop the flour into a wide clay basin, mix it with water that's not quite clean and not quite foul. Standard fare. No honey, no oil, no fancy shaping. Just dough, dense and functional. Their bread needs to survive being thrown across scaffolding, stepped on, maybe used as a pillow in a pinch. You knead like a warrior, pressing your knuckles deep, folding, turning, punching. Not angry, just efficient. You form them into squat, little loaves, more stone than sponge. They don't need to rise long. These are loaves for energy, not poetry. You remember once handing out bread on the docks. A man with arms like tree trunks bit into one, nodded silently, and went back to hauling stone like it was a pillow. That's when you learned something important. Flavor is luxury. Fuel is sacred. These loaves are fuel. You load them into the fire-hot oven. A few blacken at the edges. You leave them. Burnt crust means longer shelf life. They'll be fine. They always are. Historians still debate whether pyramid workers ate well or were practically starved. Some say the diet was steady, bread, beer, onions. Others argue it was barely enough. But in your experience, even the hardest bread holds comfort if your belly's empty enough. The fire crackles as you scrape out the batch. Charred edges, tough crust, dense core. Perfect. You set them to cool. Then comes something unusual. A quiet knock. You glance up, expecting another messenger or temple aide, but instead find a young woman in simple linen robes, mud on her sandals, worry in her eyes. "My sister is giving birth," she says, voice shaking. "We need bread for the goddess, for Taweret." You nod. No payment is offered. None is expected. You open a jar of dried dates, mash them into a paste with warm water, add a pinch of cumin, an old midwife's trick. You fold it into the dough, with careful hands, murmuring not quite a prayer, not quite a spell. You shape the loaf into the rough form of Taweret herself, hippo-bodied, lion-footed, crocodile-tailed. It's not beautiful, but it's recognizable. You carve a faint smile into the face. You think it helps. You place it into the cooler oven. Let it bake low and long so it doesn't crack. You sit beside it while it bakes, watching it rise ever so slightly, almost like it's breathing. When it's done, you wrap it in fresh linen, still warm. She thanks you quietly. Then she's gone. You sit for a moment longer. You don't move, until Asha nudges your shoulder. "There's a man asking about beer bread," she says. You groan. Beer bread. The most peculiar of all. You've made it only a handful of times. It starts with leftover beer dregs, the sludgy, yeast-laden bottom of a pot, tangy and strange. Mix it into flour. Let it ferment until it smells like an argument. Then bake. The result? Spongy, sour, oddly addictive. And yes, very slightly alcoholic. You prepare a small batch. The dregs are thick today, strong. You mix quickly, form little rounds, and toss them into the side oven. When they come out, the smell is alive, almost rude. Hori sneaks one bite. His eyes widen. "Can I have the rest?" "No," you say. "You've touched the flour too many times today. You don't deserve flavor." Asha laughs. Outside, the sun has dipped to the halfway mark. The sounds of celebration echo louder. Drums, chanting. The rhythmic slap of bare feet on dust as dancers move in spirals. You think about how none of this works without bread. The priests may bless the gods, the nobles may fund the statues. But without bread, no offerings, no processions, no rituals, just a lot of hungry, cranky humans. And that's the strange thing about your job. You're never the focus, but everything leans on you. Your oven hums like a beast purring from a meal. The coals are still strong. You've got one more batch before you even think about resting. You start preparing for it. Flour, water, a touch of salt. Outside, someone yells something joyful. A child runs past the door, waving a papyrus streamer. You hear singing, joyful, wild, real. You smile, then turn back to your dough, because the city is dancing, and your hands are what keep it full. The light outside is changing, richer now, softer, as the sun inches closer to the edge of the world. Inside the bakery, it filters through the cracks in the clay wall like molten gold, catching on the flour motes that float lazily through the air. You sit for a moment, staring at those dust, particles like they're stars. Maybe they are, in your little universe of bread. You breathe, deep, then return to the work table. Now you're making something special, not for the gods, not for the workers, not even for the living. These loaves are for the dead. You've received a quiet order from a family across town. Their matriarch has passed, and they want her spirit fed well. The ritual involves loaves buried with her, some placed on the altar, and others left outside the tomb for the passing souls. It's part religion, part tradition, part insurance policy. So you begin the loaves with more care than usual. The flour is fine, you sifted it twice yourself. The water is cool from the morning's draw. You even add a bit of honey, crushed coriander, and a few sprigs of dried mint. Not because you have to, because you want to. Asha helps you shape them. Small, oval loaves with gentle scoring on top, like rising sun rays. You press your thumb into the center of each, forming a soft dip. Later, the family will place herbs, petals, or coins there, tiny gifts for the journey beyond. As you work, the smell changes. It's richer now, slightly sour. You glance to the side of the room where yesterday's starter is bubbling gently in a clay pot. It's alive, literally, a colony of wild yeasts, captured from the air, fed with flour and water, and coaxed into symbiosis with your dough. You've come to love that smell. A little vinegary, a little warm, with a hint of something ancient. It's like the memory of bread. You scoop out a dollop and stir it into your latest batch. Sourdough, if you can call it that, was common before the word even existed. Historians now recognize that most early Egyptian loaves were naturally fermented, not because it was fashionable, but because there was no other way. You let dough sit, and yeast happens. You knead gently, watching the bubbles form under the surface, listening for that faint squish of trapped air. It's a music you know by heart. You wonder, as you often do, how the ancients first discovered this trick. Maybe someone left wet dough too long in the sun. Maybe they were too tired to bake, came back later, and found it puffed with ghostly breath. Maybe they tasted it anyway. Maybe they were desperate. Either way, fermentation became magic. And today, in your humble bakery, you still practice it, still respect it, still whisper to your dough, just in case it's listening. You shape the sour loaves into spirals, twisting ropes of dough into coils like sleeping snakes. Some believe it helps trap spirits. Others say it just bakes better. You like the shape, feels complete. You let them rise, watching the way the yeast stretches the skin, gives the dough life, and then, carefully, you bake. The oven is low now, the fire reduced to glowing coal, perfect for this batch. You slide the spirals in, then sit back and breathe the scent of 1,000 years of trial and error. Asha brings over a small clay cup of beer, not cold, not strong, but enough. You sip, let it roll across your tongue. It tastes like earth, like barley, like something unfinished, but in a good way. Behind you, Hori is dozing beside the flour sacks, head tilted back, mouth open, arms splayed like a forgotten marionette. You smile. Let him sleep. He earned it. The loaves are nearly done. Their crusts are golden, cracked just slightly. You tap one. The hollow sound echoes, soft and sure. You pull them from the oven and set them on a cooling mat. Steam escapes in lazy curls. You lean in and sniff. That tang, that sweetness, that faint fermented mystery. It's perfect. You think, Of the woman these loaves are for, someone you've never met, but you still feel connected. Because tonight, she will travel into the afterlife with your bread at her side, and in some impossible way, you'll go with her, at least part of you. Historians still debate what exactly the dead were expected to do with their tomb bread. Some argue it was symbolic. Others suggest it was meant for magical sustenance. A few radical scholars even joke that it kept them from haunting the living out of hunger. You don't know. You don't pretend to. But you do know this. No one should. Travel hungry. You wrap the loaves in clean cloth and tie them with reed string. The family will come soon to collect them. You place the bundle in a quiet corner, away from the bustle of the rest of the bakery. Outside, the festival noise swells again. Someone's playing a reed flute, bright and uneven. Children shriek with joy. The scent of grilled onions wafts in from a nearby vendor. You close your eyes, just for a second. Bread for the living, bread for the gods, bread for the dead. You've made it all today, and there's still more to go. Evening has begun its slow, smoky descent over Thebes. The air has shifted, not cooler, never truly cool, but softer, tinged with incense and roasted meat, with the crackle of oil over flame and distant laughter that floats like silk down the alleyways. The city is in celebration. But you're still working. You wipe your hands on your apron and glance at the bundles stacked near the door. Loaves for priests, loaves for pyramid workers, loaves for a funeral, loaves shaped like ducks, turtles, and the occasional experimental sun god with an unflattering nose. The bakery smells like purpose, and yet something's missing. You've seen it before, how the truly superstitious bakers prepare their final festival batches, not with ingredients, with rituals. Asher brings it up first, almost sheepishly. Should we make the kitchen gods happy? You raise an eyebrow. You really think Bez cares about a missed offering loaf? She shrugs. He's moody. She's not wrong. Bez, the lion-faced, dwarf-bodied household god, is known to protect kitchens and scare off bad spirits, but also to be unpredictable and loud. You've never seen him, but you've definitely blamed him, especially on days when the dough collapses for no reason or someone steps on a cooling loaf. So you indulge her. You set aside a small dough ball. You mix in a few extra herbs, some poppy seeds, and an indecipherable sprinkling of things Asher insists smell lucky. Then you shape it into a tiny, squat figure, short legs, wide belly, round eyes. It looks more like a deflated goose than a deity, but it's made with love. You toss it into the oven's dying heat, near the embers, not to bake, to toast. Slowly, you whisper, "No cracked crusts tomorrow, old friend." Hori brings out something even stranger, a wad of dried crocodile dung. "Where did you even, you begin?" "For protection," he says simply. You sigh. Ancient Egyptian bakers had dozens of folk traditions. Crocodile dung was sometimes burned like incense to drive off sickness, or misfortune, or just flies. Historians still argue whether this was practical medicine or superstitious. Fluff. You figure, does it matter? If it works, it works. You let him toss it onto the side fire. It sizzles, smells awful, but the flies vanish. At least there's that. Asher places the last tray of dough near the oven, letting it rise in the warmth. You sit on an upturned basket, stretching your legs. They feel like stone. You lean against the wall, head tilted back. Above you, clay amulets dangle from strings, charms against spoilage, charms against theft, charms for fertility, of dough or otherwise. Some of them are cracked, others faded, but they swing gently in the warm, bread-scented air like tiny pendulums keeping cosmic time. One of them, a clay frog, was hung by your grandmother. She used to say frogs brought luck to leavening, that if your dough refused to rise, a frog had forgotten to sing. You smile at the thought. In the corner, the bez loaf begins to brown. It smells strangely good, herby, crisp. You almost want to Bite it, but decide not to offend the god by cannibalizing his effigy. Probably best. A sudden knock at the side door startles everyone. You open it to find an old man, bent nearly double, holding a walking stick made from an old scythe. His beard is braided. His eyes are sharp. "I brought the barley," he croaks. You blink. "We didn't order barley." "No," he says, "but you forgot the protective paste." He's right. You forgot. Every year, on the second festival, night, the ovens are supposed to be smeared with a barley honey paste as an offering to keep the bread from turning bitter. You almost laugh. Almost. You thank him, take the barley, and stir it with honey in a cracked pot. Then you smear it, messily, sweetly, around the inside edge of the clay oven. It drips, sizzles, then slowly hardens into a glossy, sticky glaze. Bess Loaf watches approvingly from the embers. Rituals, folk beliefs, odd smells and strange shapes. There's something comforting about it all. You once heard a scribe joke that baking in Egypt was 1 part flour, 1 part madness, and 6 parts superstition. You didn't argue. Historians still debate whether ancient Egyptian baking rituals were born from religion or desperation. Did they truly believe in protective bread gods? Or did they just need something to explain why dough rose beautifully one day and collapsed the next? You think it's both, and neither. You think when your hands are cracked and your eyes sting and the fire won't stay lit, it helps to have someone to blame. Even if that someone is a clay frog. You finish the smear, pat the oven like a loyal beast and turn back to your table. The final batch is ready. Not large, not grand. Just 10 loaves, shaped into little open hands, palms up, fingers stubby. Asher says they represent offering. Hori thinks they look like squashed spiders. You don't care. They're soft, well-kneaded, and perfectly risen. You place them in the oven, low heat, slow bake. The fire crackles gently. The dung has stopped stinking. The charms overhead swing slower now, as if tired too. The festival outside is nearing its peak. You hear chanting, horns, a sudden chorus of cheers. Somewhere, a torchlight procession has begun. The statues are probably on the move. The gods paraded through the crowd like royalty, like ancestors, like hungry giants. You wonder if they notice. The bread. You wonder if they taste it. Probably not. But someone will. And for that someone, your work still matters. Night is beginning to wrap itself around Thebes, slow and thick like molasses poured from the sky. The golden glow of the day fades into indigo shadows, and torches light the streets with trembling, flickering halos. The bakery, too, has changed. The oven no longer roars, it glows. The fire no longer bites, it sighs. You've stopped sweating, not because it's cooler, because there's nothing left to sweat. The final loaves bake in silence. You sit beside the oven, knees drawn up, arms resting on them. Your head leans against the warm clay, and the heat feels oddly comforting now, like an old friend too stubborn to leave. The bakery is a mess. Ash everywhere. Bowls stacked like cairns. Dough crusted. On tools, hardened on your sleeves, wedged under your nails. It's beautiful, in a chaotic, flour-drenched kind of way. You stretch, slowly, bones cracking like old thatch underfoot. Asher is asleep near the back wall, curled in a ball on a flour sack. Bess Loaf cradled like a pillow. Hori is not asleep. He's trying to write something in the flour dust on the floor with a burnt stick. It might be a bird. It might be a bread roll. You'll need to clean that, you murmur. Tomorrow, he replies. Fair enough. The loaves inside the oven are nearly done. Their shapes are holding. The palms, those little hand loaves, have browned beautifully. You lift one gently with the paddle. The base is crisp, the top soft, the edges just dark enough to count as well loved. You place them in a basket lined with palm fiber, cover them with cloth, and set them near the door for pickup. They'll be taken to a shrine at dawn, another offering in a city built on offerings, and for a moment you're still, But not for long. Another task arrives. Of course it does. A man appears at the doorway, clad in a plain robe with dust to his knees and a glint of panic in his eyes. "I need bread," he says, "for an apology." You stare at him. "A what?" "My wife," he mutters. "I forgot her mother's tomb day." You nod solemnly. "Ah, a sacred violation. I need a special loaf." You wave him in. "Describe the severity." "Not talking to me. Slept facing the wall." You stroke your chin. "We're in pomegranate seed territory then." He winces. "That bad?" "Worse." You take a moment. "This will need a diplomatic loaf. Soft, sweet, maybe something nostalgic." You pull together flour, honey, fig paste, and a pinch of nut blend from a cracked pot you've been hoarding for months. You add dried pomegranate arils, precious, rare, sticky little rubies. You knead slowly, deliberately. "You'll present it warm," you instruct, with your head slightly bowed. "Speak no words unless she asks. Do not mention the tomb." He nods like he's receiving military orders. You shape the dough into a flower. A lotus, open, vulnerable. An obvious symbol. You bake it in the side oven, low and slow. You watch it closely. It browns like a sunrise. A miracle in the middle of the night. You wrap it in linen and send him off with it. Historians still discuss the role of bread in relationships. Did it serve as dowry or apology or just daily glue? There's not much on "sorry I missed your mother's tomb day" loaves, but if anyone could find one, it'd be here. You check the oven. No more loaves, just ashes now. The fire, like you, is ready to rest. You don't bother cleaning. Not yet. That's tomorrow's war. You stretch out on the floor beside the coals, which are now barely glowing. They pulse like sleepy eyes, blinking slow in the dark. You pull your apron up over your chest and settle in, and that's when it happens. A whir, faint but unmistakable. The flap of wings. You look up. A bat. It's come in through the side vent, probably drawn to the heat, or maybe just confused. It circles once, twice, then vanishes back into the night. You smile. Ancient Egyptians often believed bats were connected to the afterlife, guardians of the night, or omens, or in your case, just tiny winged loaf watchers. You close your eyes. The sounds of the city dim now. The festival is slowing. The last processions are being carried home. Priests are returning to sanctuaries. Dancers are rubbing their feet. Even the gods, you imagine, are stretching their divine backs and murmuring, "Well, that was exhausting. You're not asleep, not yet, but close." You think of the dozens of loaves you shaped, the ones for nobles, the ones for gods, the ones shaped like ducks, the ones made for forgiveness. You think of sourdough bubbles, cracked palms, charred crusts. You think of your grandmother and her frog charm, of your first time burning the bread black, of the day someone cried over a perfect loaf and said it tasted like home. You think of how bread is just flour and water and fire, and somehow also everything. You wake before the sun, not because of an alarm, not because someone called your name, but because your body knows the bakery, knows the rhythm, knows when the air shifts from night's stillness to dawn's expectant hush. You sit up slowly. Your spine sounds like gravel in a bag. You stretch until your shoulders protest, then stand, brushing flour dust off your tunic. You blink at the faint blue light seeping in through the cracked door. It's quiet. Hori's still asleep, curled, like a dog beneath a pile of empty sacks. Asha's not in the bakery. You assume she slipped out early to visit the river, or barter for figs. Or maybe she needed silence. You get it. You breathe deep, letting the familiar scent of cooled ash and stale yeast fill your lungs. It's oddly calming, like the bakery itself is in a lull, between storms, between loaves, between lives. You shuffle to the cooling shelf where the last few festival loaves sit under linen wraps, some for collection, some extra. You break one in half. Steam still rises from the middle. You take a bite. It's slightly overproofed, a bit too airy, but good. Good enough to carry you into the next hour. As you chew, you begin your least favorite job, scrubbing the ovens. You pull out the scraping rod and begin dragging soot and ash from the clay dome. It tumbles like black snow, gathering in soft piles. You work silently, careful not to make noise that would wake the apprentices. And that's when you spot it. Near the base of the oven, tucked under the edge of the clay, a small object. Not bread, not ash. A token. It's a tiny scarab carved from bone. You turn it in your fingers. Smooth. Worn. Someone left it here. Maybe Asher. Maybe a visitor. Maybe a priest with quiet hopes and no words. You place it carefully on the shelf, near the frog charm. Let it keep watch. This bakery, you realize, has become a shrine of sorts, not a temple. Not sacred in the official sense, but sacred in the real sense. Bread is life. Bread is memory. And this space, filled with burned corners and sleepy dust, is where those things happen. You finish scraping. You wipe the tables. You rinse the bowls with the last of the clean water. Your hands, though numb, move fluidly. They know every grain of wood, every groove in the clay. Like you were born here. Maybe you were. The city outside is just beginning to stir. The air smells different today, more like river wind than smoke. A brief mercy. You step outside the bakery. The street is quiet, still damp in places where the night condensed on the stones. Far off, a barge glides across the Nile, barely visible. Probably a temple boat. Probably carrying yesterday's offerings, your bread, across the current. You wonder where they'll place them. In sanctuaries? In the hands of statues? In the dirt to be reclaimed by earth and beetles? Historians still debate what happened to all the leftover temple bread. Some think it was redistributed to the poor. Others believe it was burned, sacrificed to the gods in smoke. Still others argue it was hoarded by priests with a sweet tooth. You think the truth is less dramatic. Sometimes, bread just goes away. You re-enter the bakery and light the small corner oil lamp. It flickers feebly, but holds. You sit near it, holding, your knees to your chest, staring at the dying flame. You're tired, in every way, but not empty. You've made peace with the silence of this job, the repetition, the lack of praise. Because every loaf you bake joins something bigger than you. A city, a tradition, a people who carry on through sweat, through sand, through centuries of chewing on rocks and calling it nourishment. You close your eyes, you picture the loaves from yesterday. Round, scored, shaped like animals, hands, spirals, suns. You see them, not as food, but as echoes, carved into the memory of a civilization. No one will remember your name, but someone, in 1,000 years, might dig up one of your loaves, hardened, gritty, still carrying fingerprints, still smelling faintly of coriander and thyme. They'll ask, who made this? And maybe they'll never know, but maybe they'll feel it. The hands, the care, the heat, and the silence that comes after a fire burns out. You open your eyes. The scarab charm glints faintly in the lamplight. You rise again. Time to grind, time to knead, time to begin again. You begin the grind again. Not just of grain, but of routine. It's a new day, technically, but it feels like a continuation. One long, flour-dusted loop. You reach for the sack of emmer wheat and run your fingers through it, listening to the soft rustle of husk and kernel. There's something grounding about that sound, like wind through dry reeds, like the soft whisper of memory. You load the quern, brace your knees, and begin. The scrape of stone against stone echoes through the empty bakery. It's almost meditative. You don't mind the silence. In fact, it feels earned, like a reward. After yesterday's chaos, you breathe with the rhythm, push, pull, letting your mind drift, and drift it does. You think about the texture of your loaves yesterday, a little too tight. Maybe next time you'll leave the dough to rest longer before shaping. You think about the starter, maybe time to refresh it. The bubbles looked weak. And as always, you think about the grit. Even after years, decades, you still wonder, is there a better way? A cleaner sift? A smarter grind? You've experimented. You've tried soaking, drying, double sifting, even whispering threats to the flour. Nothing truly removes all of it. Some people claim they like the grit. Some claim it makes the bread real. A reminder that life isn't smooth, that food should bite back, that even the gods, with all their divinity, need to chew through sand like everyone else. Historians still debate whether grit in ancient Egyptian bread was merely tolerated or secretly appreciated. Some argue that the texture was a cultural marker, bread that crunches, paras, bread that's honest. Others say it was just a cruel consequence of stone tools and desert winds. You think they're both right. You've tasted clean bread. Once, a trader from the north brought fine flour, milled with copper rollers. You baked a batch. It was soft, fluffy, too perfect. You hated it. It lacked character. No grit. No fight. Just air and sweetness. Bread for gods who'd never walked through wind. You remember handing it back and saying, "Pretty loaf, but it has no memory." You like your bread with scars. You continue grinding, the motion so ingrained it feels like breathing. Hori stirs behind you. He mumbles something about frogs and raisins. You leave him to his dream. You think again about the future. How long can this go on? How long will people keep baking with stones, eating dust, scraping ash from ovens? Will someone invent a sieve that works perfectly? A grain that sheds its husk willingly? A heat that bakes without burning? Will people even need bread? You're not sure, but you are sure of this. Someone, somewhere, will always need dough. Maybe not here, maybe not in clay-walled bakeries, but the motion, the act of turning grain into life, will continue. It has to. It's older than kings. You finish the grind. The flour is warm in your hands. You sift it slowly, carefully, more for habit than hope. Still, a few stones catch on the linen. You flick them away. You glance at the frog charm again. You nod at it because why not? You begin mixing. Water, salt, a bit of yesterday's dough, still bubbly, still alive. You stir gently, folding, coaxing. The texture is good. Elastic. It breathes under your fingers. Asha returns as you begin kneading. She carries a basket of river herbs, her sleeves wet. She nods without speaking. She joins you at the table. 2 hands, then 4, then 6, as Hori finally rouses himself and joins the mix. No one speaks. There's a kind of magic in this part. The dough becoming real, the silence filled with effort, the room holding the tension of something sacred being built from nothing. You form the first loaf. Round, simple, unscored, a peasant's bread, the kind that ends up sliced by a knife older than memory, dipped into soup made from onion skins and fish bones, shared across 3 mouths with 1 cup of beer. You shape another, long, twisted, a dancer's loaf, made for balance, for elegance, the kind served at festivals to people who wear painted linen and pretend to understand the symbolism. You shape another flat, thin, folded into itself like a secret, the kind hidden in a child's tunic pocket for later when mothers aren't looking. Bread is not just food. Bread is archive. Bread is evidence. Each loaf tells a story no one wrote down. Each crust holds the fingerprints of 1,000 forgotten hands. You set them aside to rise, and then, because you must, you sit again. You wipe your brow. You stretch your legs. You feel the warm sting of flour in your cuts and cracks. You're tired. Again. Always. But this is the work. This is what's real. Outside, someone shouts about fish. A donkey brays. Somewhere, a priest yawns behind temple walls. The Nile turns slowly in its bed. You reach for another bowl of flour and begin again. It's almost morning again, truly morning this time. The sky outside is fading from navy to pearl, and the bakery's shadows are changing shape. Everything is softer, quieter. The fire's been banked down to embers, just enough to warm the final batch. No more urgency. No more couriers pounding on the door. No more ducks, apologies, or divine pastries. Just you and bread, and the low hum of a city not yet fully awake. You sit with a cup of beer in your hands, lukewarm, barely fizzy. You sip it anyway. On the shelf beside you, the final loaves cool slowly. You lean in to check them. Their crusts are perfectly browned, dusted with a bit of ash from the oven floor, their bases cracked just enough to whisper, "I'm ready." You press your thumb into one. It yields gently, then springs back. Perfect. You glance around the bakery. The flour sacks are nearly empty. The water jars low. The linen cloths all need washing. The grinding stones are smudged with streaks of yesterday. The tables scattered, with seeds, smudges, crumbs. And yet, it's beautiful. You stretch out your legs, letting your heels thump gently against the cool stone. Hori is sweeping in lazy circles. Asher is outside, feeding yesterday's burnt crusts to the alley goats. They crowd around her like she's the pharaoh of leftovers. You close your eyes for just a moment. In the darkness behind your eyelids, you see it all again. Dough rising like breath. Firelight catching on flour in the air. Loaves shaped into animals, suns, spirals, prayers. You see the hands, so many hands, kneading, pressing, shaping, giving, and teeth, always teeth, gnashing through centuries of grit, grain, and godliness. Historians argue over a lot of things when it comes to ancient bread, whether it was sour or sweet, whether the grit was accidental or medicinal, whether temple offerings were symbolic or literal. But none of them can argue this. It lasted. It's still here, in crumbling loaves found in tombs, in images etched into tomb walls, in the worn grooves of grinding stones that outlived dynasties, and in you, in your cracked hands, your flour-crusted tunic, your soot-darkened fingernails. You place the last loaf on the tray, you cover it with linen, and you blow out the last oil lamp. The sun peeks over the wall outside, painting the floor with a stripe of pale gold. You stand in it. Let it warm your toes. Let it remind you that it's time to begin again. Always time to begin again. You lift the tray, you carry it to the door, and just before you open it to hand off the first bread of a new day, you look back over your shoulder, one more glance, at the oven, the stones, the flour on the table. Your world, and you smile. Because for a few precious hours, you fed the gods, the dead, the living, and maybe even yourself. And somehow, that was enough. Wind down, 300 words. And now, the fire has faded. The bakery grows quiet again. Soot cooling in the oven's belly. The loaves long gone, their scent lingering in corners like a dream not quite ready to vanish. You've closed the door behind you. Your feet light on the stone as the morning hum begins in the distance. The city stirs, but you're already drifting. The weight of flour and fire has slipped from your shoulders. The heat of the day is far away now, and the only thing left is a gentle tiredness wrapping around your limbs like a well-worn blanket. Your breath slows. You feel the ghost of yesterday's rhythm. Grind, knead, bake, rest, echoing softly through your muscles. Familiar, soothing. Outside, the Nile moves like breath, soft, steady, eternal. The same river that fed the grain, the same river that carried your bread to temples and tombs, glides on without notice. You imagine the loaves you made floating out into history. Some crumbled, some preserved, some remembered. You sink a little deeper now into the warmth of the quiet, into the stillness of the night, into the story you've walked through second by second, crumb by crumb, and just before sleep claims you, maybe you feel it, a whisper of gratitude from a god, from a ghost, from a baker 1,000 years away who also fought the fire, faced the grit, and shaped something worth remembering. So rest easy now. You've fed the world. Let it hold you, like soft dough rising in a quiet room, wrapped in linen and morning light.